Rain slammed against the rusted neon sign as it flickered above the boarded-up diner, casting trembling shadows across the empty street. A small figure in a soaked hoodie stood pressed against the glass door, her fingers trembling as she held up a tattered leather-bound notebook, its corners frayed and nearly falling apart. Inside, Jack Thompson stood frozen, his tired eyes locked on the child as she whispered through the rain-fogged glass, words he hadn't heard in over 30 years. "Did you really steal Grandma Martha's recipes?" The wind howled behind her, but her voice, sharp, young, and familiar, cut through like a knife. Jack's hand fell limp, the offer letter from a real estate mogul slipping to the floor. Outside, the girl didn't move, her hazel eyes locked on his, daring him to deny what she already knew. And inside that silence, Jack realized this wasn't a lost child. It was the beginning of something neither of them were ready for. Jack Thompson yanked the door open with shaking hands, the bell above giving a startled jingle that barely rose above the storm. Rain clung to the girl's cheeks like tears, but her eyes didn't flinch. She stepped inside without waiting for permission, water pooling around her worn sneakers, one sole half detached. The tattered notebook was still clutched in her arms like a sacred text. Jack's eyes couldn't leave it, not because of the girl, but because he knew that leather. That stitching. That exact frayed corner. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice hoarse, but the words felt hollow. He hadn't raised it like a threat, more like a plea. The girl blinked water from her lashes. "My name is Sarah," she said. "Sarah Bennett." The name struck him like an aftershock, but he didn't show it. "Not yet. I'm not here to steal anything. I made something." Jack's stomach clenched. "You made something?" She nodded, already stepping past him, toward the kitchen. "I used your stove last night. Just once. I cleaned up after." He should have shouted. Should have thrown her out, called the cops. But he followed. The scent hit him first. Not the lingering grease and disinfectant he'd grown numb to, but something warm. Fragrant. A sauce that pulled memory like a hook behind his ribs. She moved through his kitchen like she knew it better than her own body, reaching for a small pot that had been tucked behind the other cookware. She lit the burner. "I left it here because it always tastes better the second day," she said, lifting the lid with a reverence he hadn't seen in years. Steam rose, rich with herbs and something else, something sharp, nostalgic, almost painful. Jack leaned forward. "You added orange blossom water," he said without thinking. She smiled. "Just a little. And a dusting of mustard seed." Jack's throat worked. He hadn't tasted that combination since the fall of '98. "Who taught you that?" Sarah glanced up. "Grandma Martha," she said softly. The name punched through him. He staggered back a half step, as if the air had changed. "Martha Kent?" he asked. "From Bellini's?" Sarah nodded. "She's my grandma. She's in the hospital. I haven't seen her in weeks." Jack felt the room spin slightly, the storm outside roaring louder through the walls. Martha, Kentucky. The woman who once beat him in every local culinary competition. The woman who had vanished from the scene years ago after Bellini's shut down. The woman who once accused him of stealing one of her signature recipes, his bestseller, even now. And her granddaughter had just walked into his kitchen, cooking like she carried Martha's soul in her bones. "Why now?" he managed to say. "Why show up tonight?" Sarah didn't answer. She turned off the burner, ladled a spoonful of the stew into a small bowl, and held it out. "Because the man who wants to buy your diner doesn't care about your food," she said. "But I do." Jack hesitated. Then took the bowl. The heat bit into his palm like a dare. He tasted. It wasn't just good. It was transcendent. The same warmth. The same undertone of black garlic and lavender that he could never fully replicate. And yet, there was something new. Something lighter. Brighter. As if the recipe had remembered something it was missing. He set the bowl down slowly. "You used white miso," he whispered. Sarah smiled. "Grandma never thought it belonged in stew." I think she was wrong. For the first time in months, Jack laughed, short, surprised, broken at the edges. Then the sound collapsed into silence as he sat heavily on a stool. "You're 10. Almost 11. You're homeless." She shrugged. "It's temporary. And you cooked this? With what you left in the pantry?" A long silence passed. Jack's thoughts turned to the papers on his desk, the revised offer from a sleek corporate group, hungry to bulldoze the past and rebrand his diner into something soulless. They wanted the real estate. Maybe even his name. But not his food. They definitely didn't want this girl. "I should call someone," he murmured, mostly to himself. "No," she said sharply, then softened. "Please don't. I'm not trying to stay. I needed someone to remember what her food tastes like. Just once." Jack looked at her again. Really looked. Not as a dripping street kid or a trespasser. But as something else entirely. "You've been here more than once." Her silence was an answer. "That night the rosemary vanished. And the baking tray I thought I'd left in the sink. I cleaned it," she said. "Twice." "Why my diner?" She hesitated. "Because it smells like her. Like Grandma. Like home, kind of." Something cracked inside Jack, deeper than the daily financial dread. Something human. "She was right, you know," he said after a moment. "Cooking is just another kind of memory." Sarah hugged the notebook tighter to her chest. "She said you used to be good." He raised an eyebrow. "She said you were the only one who could make pastry sing." Jack chuckled softly, despite himself. "And what do you think?" Sarah tilted her head. "I think you're tired." That silenced him. "But I also think you still have something left," she added. "Otherwise, why would you still be here?" Jack didn't answer. A gust of wind slammed against the windows. The diner lights flickered. Then the door opened. Emily Carter stepped in, umbrella dripping, eyes sweeping the room until she found them. Her gaze landed on Sarah, then flicked to Jack, and settled on the bowl between them. "You found her," Emily said, softly. Not surprised. Not angry. Almost relieved. Jack stood slowly. "She found me." Sarah's eyes darted between them. "You know each other?" Emily walked toward her and knelt. "I've been looking for you all night. Your teacher said you never made it to the church shelter." "I wasn't ready," Sarah whispered. "Not to stop cooking." Emily looked at Jack. "She's scared. Thinks they'll separate her from her grandmother if the wrong people find out." "They will," Sarah said quickly. "They always do." Emily turned back to her. "Not if we find the right ones first." Jack took a deep breath. "So what do we do?" Emily stood. "We tell the story." Jack frowned. "What story?" Emily nodded toward the notebook. "The one she's been writing in. And maybe, the one you've been forgetting." Jack stared at the notebook, the rain, the girl, and the stew that tasted like a second chance. Then his eyes narrowed. "Tomorrow night," he said. Sarah looked up. "What?" "We cook," he said. "Your grandma's recipes. One night only. No sign. No advertising. Just the lights on and the door unlocked." "And if no one comes?" Emily asked. "Then at least we fed each other," Jack replied. "And that's more than this place has done in years." Sarah blinked. "And if they do come?" Jack smiled. "Then we give them a reason to remember what food is supposed to feel like." Outside, the storm began to fade. Inside, the kitchen lights glowed a little warmer. And somewhere, quietly, stubbornly, the diner began to breathe again. Before the rain. Before the stew. Before the storm that pushed Sarah into the diner like a ghost from Jack's forgotten past, there was just the silence of hunger and the ache of waiting. Sarah Bennett had been sleeping under the wooden gazebo behind the Riverside Community Library for 13 nights. She kept count by drawing tiny stars in the margins of her recipe book, just as her grandmother once taught her. When things feel scattered, Grandma Martha would say, "Draw stars." They're reminders that light is always there, even if you can't see it. It was on the 14th night that she met Sophia. Sophia Thompson, 7 years old, wore mismatched socks and carried a plastic grocery bag like it was treasure. She'd wandered away from her mother's hand during a trip to the corner store and had stumbled upon Sarah carefully tearing basil leaves over a cold sandwich she'd scrounged from the church pantry box. "You live here?" Sophia asked with the bluntness only children possess. Sarah didn't answer. She never did, not at first. "You don't smell like the scary people," Sophia added. "You smell like tomato and, rosemary." That made Sarah glance up. "You know rosemary?" Sophia nodded proudly. "My dad used to put it on potatoes." Before he left. A long silence passed. Then Sarah broke the sandwich in half and offered her the bigger piece. They sat beneath the gazebo, sharing the food in silence until Sophia whispered, "Are you scared?" Sarah paused. Then nodded once. "Only at night." They didn't say anything else after that. But the next evening, Sophia returned, this time with a thermos of warm tea and 2 granola bars. She told her mother she was playing chef and begged for cinnamon, which she sprinkled into the tea herself. Sarah could taste the care in every sip. That was when she started sneaking into Thompson's diner. At first, it was just for the warmth. The back door lock was ancient and loose. Jack hadn't replaced it since his father passed, partly from grief, partly because he didn't expect anyone to care enough to break in. He was wrong. Sarah slipped in the first time at 2:43 a.m., wearing 3 layers of mismatched jackets and carrying a flask of melted snow from the park fountain. She sat on the tiled floor of the kitchen, watching the ovens like sacred shrines, and cried silently into her hands. The next night, she turned on one burner, just for the hiss of gas and the comfort of flame. The night after that, she started cooking. Using leftover onions. A can of crushed tomatoes. Fennel seed tucked into an unlabeled spice jar. Everything else she had learned from Grandma Martha, not just how to stir, but when to stop stirring. When to wait. When to trust the smell of something rising. She cleaned everything afterward. Scrubbed the floor with baking soda. Rearranged the spice rack in the order her grandmother taught her, bright to deep. She wasn't there to steal. Just to remember. Meanwhile, Jack Thompson was unraveling, slowly, quietly, like threads from an old apron. He hadn't touched a frying pan in 3 weeks. Most nights he fell asleep in his office chair, spreadsheets open and unpaid invoices stacked like tombstones around him. The restaurant was dead, but he hadn't buried it. Not yet. He kept telling himself there'd be one more night where everything clicked. Just one. But customers stopped coming. Vendors stopped calling. Even the memories stopped visiting. He used to dream of his father standing at the pass window, yelling about burnt toast. Lately, he only dreamed of empty chairs. That was when Emily Carter reappeared in his life. Emily had once been a regular, back when she first started teaching in Riverside. She used to bring her lesson plans and grade papers over pie and coffee at the same corner booth every Thursday. He remembered her laugh. She remembered his nervous attempts at croissants. "I heard you're closing," she said that day, dropping her umbrella in the bin by the door. "That true?" "Not officially," he said. "But it's coming." They talked for nearly an hour, about lost time, burned bridges, and small towns that forget too easily. That was the same day she mentioned Sarah. "There's a girl," Emily said. "Bright, quiet. Keeps a notebook close to her chest like it's her whole world. I think she's not going home at night." Jack didn't connect the dots, not yet. He should have. The faint scent of burnt sage. The half-used milk carton that no one opened. The spice jars that kept rearranging themselves like someone was composing a culinary symphony in his absence. But it was Sophia who finally said something. At school, during a parent-teacher meeting, she looked up at Emily and whispered, "I gave Sarah my cinnamon. She used it on the tea." "Who's Sarah?" Emily asked. "She lives in a restaurant," Sophia said. Emily's eyes widened. 2 days later, she followed the trail. Questioned the staff at the pantry. Traced the volunteer logs. Read between the lines of school lunches ordered but never eaten. She showed up at Jack's diner that night, ready to ask for access to the kitchen security footage. She never had to. Jack found Sarah first. And not because of a noise or a broken dish, but because of the smell. He walked in, hungover from a night of financial panic, and the air was thick with something he hadn't breathed in years. Lavender. Black garlic. Orange blossom. And mustard seed. He followed it like a dream, through the swinging doors, past the cold ovens, to a girl standing on a milk crate with a wooden spoon in one hand and Martha Kent's spirit in the other. She didn't see him right away. She was tasting, eyes closed, face soft, adjusting a pinch of salt like it was the most important decision in the world. It was only when the floor creaked under his foot that she turned. Neither of them spoke. The spoon clinked against the pot as she slowly dipped it back inside. She didn't run. And Jack didn't yell. Because something about the moment told him, somewhere deep in his marrow, that shouting would break the spell. And he wasn't ready for that kind of silence. That was 2 nights before the storm. Before she whispered about stolen recipes and shook the foundations of his legacy. Before the notebook. Before the question. And yet even then, he felt it. This girl wasn't lost. She was coming home. The storm hadn't ended, at least not inside Jack. He stared at the girl across from him as she gently set the bowl down, the edge of her sleeve still damp from the rain. Her hands were small, knuckles slightly raw, but her movements were calm. Precise. Familiar. Too familiar. There was a rhythm to how she moved in his kitchen, but it felt more like she belonged there than he did. She stirred the stew like she was conducting an orchestra he'd forgotten how to lead. And when she looked up, eyes locked on his, the question burned behind them. "You didn't answer me," Sarah said softly. Jack swallowed hard. "What question?" Her hand rested on the notebook. "Did you really steal Grandma Martha's recipe?" The silence that followed was thick enough to carve. Jack let out a slow breath and turned toward the counter, eyes scanning the peeling edge of the prep table as if it held an excuse. But it didn't. Nothing did. "She gave it to me," he said. Sarah's brow furrowed. "The stew?" Jack nodded, but his jaw tightened. "Years ago. Before she was famous. Before Bellini's. We were both line cooks back then. Shared everything, recipes, ideas, wine. One night, she made this stew after a double shift. Said it was something her grandmother taught her in Sicily. I begged for the recipe. She said no. So I watched her. Took notes. Made my own version the next night." Sarah's voice was thin. "And then you served it at a food festival. With your name on it." Jack turned slowly, the guilt plain on his face. "It wasn't exactly the same." "It was close enough," she whispered. Jack said nothing. Sarah stepped back slightly, hugging the notebook tighter to her chest. She cried. When she saw it on TV. Said you didn't even change the garnish. Jack flinched. He hadn't. The rosemary sprig. The cracked pepper swirl. Even the ceramic bowl had been identical, borrowed from Martha's shelf. I was 26, he said. Desperate. Angry. She was on the rise, and I was still flipping omelets. I wanted a win. Sarah's expression didn't change. You got one. He nodded. And lost the only real friend I had. The room fell quiet except for the soft ticking of the rain on the windows. Emily stood near the door, silent, watching this unfold like a memory she had no power to stop. But Sarah wasn't done. She stepped forward and opened the notebook, slowly, deliberately, to a page with shaky cursive at the top. Her grandmother's writing. You see this? She asked, pointing. Jack nodded. This is the original version. From her. And this, she turned to the next page, is mine. My twist. He leaned in. Citrus peel. White miso. Ground fennel instead of seeds. You made this better, he said before he could stop himself. Sarah blinked at him. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted you to taste it. To know she never stopped cooking. Even when she had nothing. Jack swallowed a lump rising in his throat. Then Emily spoke for the first time in minutes. She's not the only one who never stopped. They both turned to her. I've been watching you, Jack, she said, stepping closer. You've kept this place open longer than anyone thought possible. Not because of pride. Because of guilt. He exhaled sharply, almost a laugh. Guilt doesn't pay rent. No, Emily said. But it kept the doors open long enough for Sarah to find her way here. Jack looked down at the floor. Then at Sarah. Then at the pot of stew. His voice came low and uncertain. If your grandmother really hated me, why would she send you here? Sarah didn't answer. She just held out the notebook again and flipped to the last page. A folded letter was tucked inside, yellowed with time. She unfolded it, hands trembling slightly, and placed it on the counter. The handwriting was unmistakably Martha's. The date, 6 months before Bellini's closed. If I ever disappear, tell him the recipe was always meant to be shared. I just wanted him to ask. Tell him the secret wasn't in the rosemary. It was in the forgiveness. Jack's breath caught. She wrote that, he whispered. Sarah nodded. She kept it in the back of the book. Never told anyone. Not even me, until she got sick. Jack stared at the paper like it might burn through the counter. Emily's voice softened. She didn't hate you, Jack. She waited for you to come back. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the letter. Then he pulled back. I can't fix the past, he said. Sarah tilted her head. But you can fix dinner. That made Jack laugh. Choked and short, but real. He looked at the stew again. Then at the girl who shouldn't have known how to balance cumin and thyme but somehow did. And that's when the knock came. Not on the door. On the glass. A tall man in a suit stood outside, phone pressed to his ear, rain trickling down his collar. When Jack opened the door, the man smiled tightly and stepped in like he owned the place. Jack Thompson, he asked, brushing water from his sleeve. Yes. The man handed him an envelope. Martin Geller. We spoke 2 weeks ago. Jack's heart sank. Martin Geller. The real estate developer. The one who wanted to gut the diner, replace it with a boutique cafe, maybe slap Jack's name on the front like a museum exhibit. He hadn't expected him to show up tonight. Not in the middle of a storm. I heard there's been renewed interest in your establishment, Geller said, his eyes flicking past Jack and landing squarely on Sarah. Curious little buzz going around about a mystery chef. Sarah stepped back instinctively, shielding the notebook. This place is not for sale, Jack said flatly. Geller smiled. That's funny. Because last I checked, you're behind on 3 vendor accounts and 2 months' rent. He held up the envelope. A revised offer, he said. Triple the original. With a signing bonus. Emily moved closer to Sarah. Jack didn't touch the envelope. Why the bonus? Because, Geller said with a thin smile, whatever little miracle you're cooking in here is catching attention. And people want in before it goes viral. Sarah's eyes narrowed. You mean, you want to buy my grandma's recipes? Geller turned to her, surprised. You're the one they're talking about. I'm the one who made the stew. His smile widened. Then maybe we can talk about branding. We could call it. You can leave now, Jack cut in. Geller blinked. Excuse me. I said get out. Geller's face darkened. You're making a mistake. Jack stepped forward, towering now. I made the real mistake 20 years ago. I'm not doing it again. The door slammed behind the man as the wind howled. Sarah looked up at Jack. What happens now? Jack turned to her, something clear in his eyes for the first time in years. Now we cook. And we let the world taste what they forgot. Sarah's lip trembled. And if they try to take it again? He knelt beside her. Then we protect it. Together. Outside, the rain pounded harder. But inside, a storm had passed, and a fire had finally been lit. By morning, the storm had moved on, but the diner still held its scent. The stew. The lavender. The miso warmth clinging to the air like a promise no longer broken. Sarah slept upstairs, curled beneath a wool blanket in the office Jack had hastily converted into a makeshift room. The notebook rested beside her pillow like a trusted animal, always within reach. Her face, so often sharp with caution and quiet fear, had softened in sleep. In that silence, she looked younger, like the 10-year-old she still was. Jack stood by the window, coffee in hand, watching the street wake slowly under gray light. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about eviction or cost per plate. He was thinking about saffron. About the way Sarah explained it, the weight of every tiny thread, the invisible hands behind each one. How she described it like memory, steeped in something sacred. He turned back to the kitchen, where Emily was already moving. Her hair was tucked back, sleeves rolled up, gently humming as she arranged flowers in small mason jars. You didn't sleep, she said, not needing to look up. Jack smiled. I wasn't tired. She placed a jar at the window. You think they'll come? He glanced at the clock. Then at the empty tables. They won't come for me, he said. But they might come for her. And they did. The first knock came at 4:50 p.m., 10 minutes before the doors were meant to open. An old woman in a red scarf. Said she saw a post online. Said she smelled something on the wind. Then a man in a leather jacket. Said his father proposed to his mother in this diner. He'd heard someone was cooking again. Wanted to see if it still tasted like 1978. By 6 p.m., every table was full. Sarah emerged from the back, apron 2 sizes too big, her sleeves tucked in. She kept her eyes down, cheeks pink. But when someone asked what made the soup taste like springtime, she looked up and answered without fear. Lemon zest and lavender, she said. And a memory. Laughter followed her around the room. So did warmth. So did something heavier, recognition. They served 4 courses that night. Every plate came with a story. The rosemary beef stew came with Jack's apology, offered not as a speech, but as a recipe card folded in half, hand-signed, forgive the garnish. The citrus tart came with a mystery. Guess the hidden spice. The prize, Sarah's smile when they got it right. And the soup that started everything, was ladled from the pot she stirred herself, balanced on her step stool like a ship's captain at the helm. My grandma called it celebration soup, she said. Because even when we had nothing, we had that. Emily played the old piano near the window, her fingers dancing through melodies as the crowd hummed and laughed and leaned close. It was a night of remembering. A night of tasting things they hadn't tasted in years. And none of them knew that the next course wasn't on the menu. It arrived at 8:07 p.m., in the form of a hospital van. Sarah didn't see it at first. She was too busy plating the final dessert, apple tart with rosemary caramel, her hands trembling from excitement. Then the bell jingled. She turned. And dropped the spoon. Martha Kent stood in the doorway, thinner than Sarah remembered, her skin pale, a scarf wrapped gently over her graying hair. But her eyes, oh, her eyes, were exactly the same. "Grandma," Sarah whispered. No one moved. Then she ran. Jack caught the plate before it shattered. Sarah flung herself into Martha's arms with a cry so raw it split the room in two. The applause came a moment later. Quiet at first. Then louder. Then rising until every diner guest stood and clapped for a reunion that felt like a prayer being answered. Martha held her granddaughter like something fragile, something once lost to the world and now returned. She whispered through tears, "You found your way back." Sarah nodded into her chest. "I cooked." Martha pulled back, studying her face. "I know. I could taste it from 3 blocks away." Later, when the crowd had thinned and the dishes had cooled, the 4 of them sat together, Jack, Martha, Emily, and Sarah, at the booth by the window. The lights were dim. The piano quiet. The notebook rested open on the table. "I saw the menu," Martha said, flipping pages. "You made it your own." Sarah looked down. "With his help." Jack's eyes glistened. "Your recipes saved this place." "No," Martha said, firm but gentle. Her courage did. Emily leaned in. "You know, we had an offer to sell everything. Franchise the menu. Use Sarah's recipes in places she'll never see." Martha nodded slowly. "And?" Jack looked at Sarah. Then smiled. "We said no." Sarah blinked. "You did?" He nodded. "We're not giving away stories we haven't finished telling." Martha reached out, resting her hand over Sarah's. "Then it's time we write them together." They did. Over the next weeks, the diner was reborn, not with neon or money, but with memory. With songs and sauces and handwritten notes. With people who came to feel something again. Martha and Sarah worked side by side, sharing duties and secrets, arguing over spices and singing old Sicilian cooking rhymes. Emily quit teaching and joined them full-time, curating music and moments, building nights around themes like first dates and family tables. And Jack, well, Jack began sleeping again. Dreaming again. Laughing again. He was no longer just a chef. He was a keeper of the flame. One afternoon, Sarah stood behind the counter, carefully rewriting a recipe on new stationery they designed together. A man walked in, a stranger. Suit. Polished shoes. He looked around, unimpressed. "I'm here for the concept," he said. "Heard you turned down Geller's offer. I represent someone bigger." Jack stepped forward. "We're not for sale." The man smirked. "Everything's for sale." Sarah came around the counter, wiped her hands, and held out a small card. On it, handwritten, were the words. "Some recipes you inherit. Some you earn. Ours, you live." He blinked. Then left. And no one ever offered to buy the place again. Because they finally understood. What they were tasting wasn't just food. It was legacy. It was forgiveness. It was a little girl's notebook turned into a cathedral of flavor. And it wasn't meant to be owned. It was meant to be shared. Just like Martha always said.